Mr. Greinke, you may give your rebuttal argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. In Mr. Hurley's closing argument, he got to mention some things that I think were wrong based on the testimony that you heard. I don't think it's intentional. Over this period of time, things can be confusing and you might hear things differently. And if I say anything wrong, rely on your collective memories. I'm not going to go over everything that he said that I thought the witnesses disagreed with or didn't come out quite right, but some of them I have an obligation to do so. One thing that I think is interesting about the defense closing argument is there is not one mention of why she wouldn't have been to work on time that day. And to think that is it cherry picking, is it tunnel vision, or is it an obvious question the police should ask when there's a death and the suspect gives a statement that's not true? It's objectively not true that she could come in late. The employees didn't testify that you could flex your time or come in whenever. She always called. She got a call that day at 8:02. They expected her. She knew she had to be there. So why was she driving north? If everything was okay and everything was normal, and the defense made no mention of it. We're not playing games here. We're not trying to hide the ball from you. We didn't try to hide any information. Yes, when Sergeant Ely called a suspect to have him come in, he doesn't tell him the whole truth. That is how police work sometimes. But they record it and they give it to you so you can evaluate it. Does it make a difference? Did it change the interview? If it does, it does. But they don't hide it. They show you what they do. The defense, on the other hand, really cherry picks a lot more. They talk about things as if other things just never happened. Where were they going that day? No mention of it. No mention of why there's grass stuck in the trunk and there's dirt in the trunk. These are not cherry-picked things. These are not speculation. These are facts that you were shown and you know they're true now. That's how you determine if somebody's telling you the truth. I understand the defendant does not have a burden. He does not have to prove one thing to you. I have a burden. But when you get a story that's not true, it's certainly something you have to take into account. Almost any homicide case without witnesses would be circumstantial. The victim cannot speak. The suspect may or may not tell you what happened. And you have to evaluate that. I'm at a disadvantage. I wasn't there. I don't know exactly what hand he used to hit her when. But there are some things you can tell that he's lying about. And again, if he's lying, there's no other reasonable hypothesis I can come up with other than he's guilty. I do want you to use your common sense, just as Mr. Hurley stated, and ask yourselves if any of his story makes sense. Not that he has to prove it to you, but if it doesn't make sense, why wouldn't it make sense? What would the conclusion come from? This cup that we've been talking so much about, you're probably getting sick of hearing it and seeing it, would not cause injuries to her face as described. A broken nose, a bruise, a laceration, bruises on the inside of the lips, scratches, not from one mug, not from one strike with a mug. The top broken off in two pieces, not from hitting flesh. Not possible. Hitting the windshield, more likely, hard surface. After the defendant has to cover up what he did, he tries to knock out the windshield to say that's what caused this. So after Mr. Erler goes by, the mug striking the windshield would break off. Hard surface. Size of a fist. One piece of broken plastic on the dash, right below that. The other piece, where the mug is, on the driver's side with the top this way. Hit the mug, put it down. More likely than a fist at an angle, cocked, while you're driving, while you're not braking, while you're not swerving, with both hands reaching, in a third of a second, tenth of a second, where you see a bird turn into a pipe and beat that pipe to the windshield. Not possible, defies physics. It's not cherry picking, it's what happened, that's the way to evaluate. Now, Mr. Hurley also said a few things that I think was trying to read into things I was saying that I never never use that as an example, never use that as a reason for my story. The purse is in the back seat. I understand some people put their purses in the back seat, and maybe she did. But certainly it's suspicious. Somebody that uses her phone as much as she does and calls her mom as much as she does would put it where it would be difficult to reach, if not impossible, as you're driving, up on the back seat as if it had spilled out, as if things had to be put back into it and put onto a seat with the billfold and the purse or phone just sitting right on top loose. To me, it looks suspicious, something for you to evaluate. Not that this was some premeditated plan. I never suggested that. We know his story is a lie, and we know innocent people don't need to lie. Mr. Hurley said that we've never given you a mechanism for the injuries. I'm pretty sure in my opening statement, and with Dr. McCubbin, and certainly with my cross-examination of the defendant, we talked about him using his fist to punch her, breaking her nose, causing abrasions on his hand, struggling in the car, her scratching him hitting her. Outside the car, I'm pretty sure we were pretty clear that while they're on the ground, that's where the head injuries are coming from. There is a lot of blood on the ground. That's swamp grass. It's not a solid surface, so it's going to seep through, and it was raining. But if you're tracking a deer and see that blood, that's a lot of blood. And there's blood in 2 spots right next to that tire. So for Mr. Hurley to say that I never gave you an example of where these injuries could come from or what would cause them, his fists, both of them had injuries. Both had injuries. The experts for the defense kept talking about her ducking fast enough to beat the pipe coming through the windshield, ducking down, getting hit in the back of the head, either with the end of the pipe or the long section of the pipe, which I still don't think is possible, and that would force her head forward into the dash or into the mug. Pipes coming forward through the windshield, hitting her, it's going to force her back. That's not very complicated physics. I don't think you need an expert opinion for that. The blood in the dash, I thought was very little, and Mr. Stalke, I believe, testified that they were transfer stains. There was also a hole in the windshield with water dropping down, and there was blood on the outside of the windshield. Now, why was there blood on the outside of the windshield? In the struggle that happened in the car and outside the car, the defendant would probably have his hands full of blood. Using the pipe, as I showed you, hitting the windshield, his hand hits the outside of that windshield. His blood and his DNA is also found there. If it happened the way he described, and he took it out with one hand, there should be none of his blood at all on that windshield. Mr. Hurley talked about how this was an emotional statement, and police interviewed him at the scene when he was emotional. That should not surprise you. Anytime a police officer would go to a scene, I would think one of the very first questions they would ask, no matter how emotional, what happened? They might ask you your name first. Who are you? What happened? And then probably something like, where were you going? Where were you coming from? Basic information that even though people are in an emotional state can usually provide. And if they can't, certainly later they could, after they calm down. I would not expect him to know every fact that happened in split second and something traumatic. I understand that. I wouldn't expect you to give us all of the details, but how about any detail? How about what were you talking about? You don't remember your wife's last words to you. How about where did the pipe hit her? Where did you see the injury? Some things you're not going to remember, like the last car you saw on your way to the courthouse this morning. You would not remember. But when there's something traumatic happening, that does seem to stimulate your memory a little bit. Where were you when you heard about 911, JFK's assassination? People could describe those in very good detail. Everyone else who testified that was traumatized remembered where they were working, where they were going, who talked to them, what they said. Mr. Kendhammer not only doesn't know the details, but how about where were you going? That doesn't seem to be a difficult question. Why wasn't she at work? Never answered. How can you see a pipe going that fast? How did your hands actually hit the windshield? Some details. Mr. Hurley indicated Nick Stalke was not qualified to testify about glass. I'm pretty sure he cleared that up. He's not qualified to talk about the scientific properties of glass, but certainly his boss knows that he's doing glass analysis and testifying around the state in cases involving glass. The scratches to the defendant's neck clearly look like fingernail scratches. I know Dr. Cook says they're not, but Dr. Cook also had a problem figuring out which injury happened first to the back of Ms. Kendhammer's head, or even whether it was the right or the left. And I think you can evaluate your credibility for yourselves. The DNA expert, Kevin Scott, I think clearly said marriage had absolutely nothing to do with statistics. I think Kevin Scott understood his statistics. I don't think Mr. Hurley understood them. Mr. Hurley talked about the time that this would take. And I mentioned before that a boxing match is rounds of 3 minutes each. There's a lot of blows that you can land in 3 minutes, even 1 minute. A blow per second is a lot of blows. A lot of movement can happen. You see a wrestling match or a boxing match, there's a lot that can go on in a very short period of time, especially when two people are fighting. And when one person can overpower the other, a lot of injury can be inflicted, as you see here. The real question when it comes to time is, why would he wait 5 minutes before calling 911? If he turned on a Burton Cooley about 8, the first call was at 8:05, that's a lot of time to not call 911 when your wife needs help. Go now. That's 1 minute. How many blows have been given? How many opportunities to call 911 have already passed? That's 2 minutes. It's a long time. I'm not going to do the full 5. It's a long time that a lot can go on. It doesn't take very long to smother somebody. It doesn't take very long to hit somebody. Even 50, 60 times you could do that in a minute easy. This wasn't that many counts. How long does it take to put a pipe through a windshield? A couple seconds. More than enough time to accomplish this. Hollywood has made us think that fights have to last 10 minutes and people fight on and on, but when you watch boxers or wrestlers after 2 minutes, they're dragging and they're professional athletes. This was a knockdown, drag-out fight. Mr. Hurley said that he was doing CPR. The only person who can confirm that is a defendant who we know has lied about many things in this case. Mr. Hurley said that the police didn't bother looking for the truck he described. I'm fairly certain that we presented evidence from Deputy Amundsen, who that day was trying to get as much video as he could before it was destroyed to see what he could see. If there was a flatbed truck, or a truck with pipes, or a scrap truck. Captain Zimmerman went out to Wild Wings and found video there. They went up and down the highway looking for video. When Mr. Hurley says things like that, it's like he's watching a different case and trying to get you to believe things that just aren't true. Rely on your own memory of the testimony that you heard. Defendant was emotional during his statements. He wanted to see his wife. He wanted to make sure he was with her. Is a guilty man who doesn't want her to wake up and start talking? Is somebody who always wants to control her, who always needs to be with her? Let the first responder do what they're going to do. Let the doctors do what they're going to do. Most people understand that at a scene. But he wanted to make sure that he was there if she did wake up. And even if you believe that he was emotional during those statements and you can't trust the story of the pipe or what he really saw, well, how about a year later when he's testifying at a trial and he still has no idea where he was going, except now it's a memory of a May lunchroom talk, never mentioned the name logging before, and now all of a sudden, for the first time, we hear Jared logging. So the police do what they've been doing for the last year. Let's go find the truth. Let's go talk to Jared logging. Maybe he had a windshield that needed to be fixed. Well, he was pretty clear he did not. So that story, again, is a lie that he told you. How about a year later, when all that emotion is gone, he denies calling Justin Heim the day of the interview. The day of the interview, remember when he's so distraught, and he's focusing on the funeral, and he's thinking about Barb, doesn't really want to talk about it, and he's crying, and he's in the shed working. His thought was, I'll call Justin Heim, somebody who doesn't call very often. On his way to the sheriff's department for an interview, he knew it was coming. He knew they suspected him. He knew he was guilty. And he wanted to find out what Justin might say so he would know what he needed to say in the interview. So that's why when he gets there, he's very vague. It's a guy in Holman, I do work for him, or I don't do work for him. Keys are in the truck at the end of the driveway. Oh, I've never actually done that before. I actually wouldn't know that. And then they tell him, we've talked to Justin. And he right away switches to, well, it's a friend of Justin's. An innocent man would not need to lie about any of that. Would not need to call Justin Heim. Would not need to make up any stories. And Mr. Hurley said that what the state has been saying is ridiculous. You be the judges of that. We've tried to give you the facts. There's some things we have to conclude from the facts because I wasn't there. Barbara can't tell us what happened. And the only person who was there has told lie after lie after lie. And the only reason he would lie is because he's done something wrong. Barbara fought for her life. Clearly, there are defensive injuries. Her back of her hands, the neck, the scratches on Mr. Kendhammer, the scratches on his chest, none of that came from glass. If that were from glass spray, why only in the spots where hands would go with fingernails? Why not in the face, the forehead, arms maybe, backs of the hands maybe? Because there wasn't any. The glass didn't cause the scratches on her neck or the mug on her neck, because again, the glass, face, other sides of the neck, hands, arms, nothing like that. The defendant still has not been able to tell you what he did in the trunk, where he was going, and why she wasn't at work. There's no reasonable hypothesis you can come up with that a pipe would have come from any vehicle or anywhere from the direction of one lane crossing over into where she was sitting, causing the cracks as described, and the defendant not know what he was doing, where he was going, and have no excuse for why she's not at work. There's no reasonable hypothesis that you can come up with. So as Mr. Hurley said, I also urge you to use your common sense. When people tell you stories, how do you know they're not true? When people lie to you, do they usually have a reason to lie? And we've proven to you how those injuries happened. We've also proven to you how they did not happen and could not have happened. And we've proven to you that Mr. Kendhammer, for some reason that I can't tell you because he's the only one who knows, killed his wife and then tried to cover it up and then came into court and lied to you to try to get away with it. Don't let him get away with it.